At 4:36 in the morning near Kharkiv, silence was shattered as Russia unleashed a massive strike of cruise missiles and drones to wipe out Ukraine's artillery. What followed was not just a battle, but a chain reaction of counterstrikes, ambushes, and precision firepower that turned the attackers into the hunted. But could this clash mark more than a tactical victory? Was it the turning point that exposed the limits of Russia's military power? At 4:36 a.m., deep inside the mist-covered plains near Kharkiv, Ukrainian patrols moved quietly yet alertly. Their radars, reinforced with advanced Western-supplied sensors, picking up faint electronic echoes across the horizon. The pre-dawn stillness felt tense, a deceptive calm that masked incoming danger. Without warning, a formation of Russian Su-34 bombers unleashed a heavy barrage of cruise missiles from the east, while swarms of kamikaze drones, likely Iranian-designed Shaheds, dove straight toward Ukraine's artillery positions. Yet Ukrainian operators were already scrambling air defenses into action, determined not to be caught off guard. This wasn't just a routine strike, it was a calculated attempt to obliterate the entire Ukrainian artillery battery anchoring the defensive line. In mere seconds, the fragile silence shattered, unfolding as a brutal demonstration of multi-phase modern warfare. The opening salvo came fast and merciless. Within moments of the Su-34 strike, the first Russian cruise missiles streaked low over the fields, engines howling as they slammed into the outskirts of the Ukrainian battery. Yet even under this sudden assault, American-supplied counter-radar and defensive systems were already activating, allowing Ukrainian crews to prepare for the fight rather than collapse in chaos. Almost simultaneously, swarms of kamikaze drones descended from the eastern sky, each diving with lethal precision toward radar dishes and exposed artillery crews. For a split second, the Ukrainians had no choice but to scatter, squads breaking formation and rushing for foxholes and reinforced dugouts. Yet this was not blind panic. Commanders, already drilled with NATO-style coordination, barked orders to deploy mobile air defense units, including American-supplied Stinger teams and German Gepards, which roared into action within moments, ensuring the drone assault would not go unanswered. Radar operators worked frantically, their screens flashing alive with hostile signatures as warning sirens wailed across the sector, the unmistakable tone of imminent impact. Within moments, shoulder-launched man-pads like US-supplied Stingers and British Starstreaks, along with vehicle-mounted anti-air systems such as German Gepards, roared to life, firing bright streaks of interceptors into the night sky. Above the embattled plains, the darkness erupted in bursts of tracer fire, arcs of 30mm rounds clawing upward at the drones overhead, proving Ukraine's defenses were far from helpless and forcing many of the attackers to explode mid-air before reaching their targets. Some drones were shredded mid-air, bursting into flaming debris that rained across the damp plains, while others slipped through, exploding dangerously close to the Ukrainian artillery positions, but failing to silence them. Above the chaos, reconnaissance UAVs clawed their way into the sky, Bayraktar TB2s alongside American-supplied Scan Eagle units, feeding live data back to operators desperately working to pinpoint the exact coordinates of Russian missile launches. Every second counted, yet Ukraine's integration of Western technology meant each moment brought them closer to turning defense into decisive counterattack. If Ukrainian operators could pinpoint the Russian launch sites, the counterstrike could begin, but for now survival came first. The battlefield was alive with a storm of sound, radar alarms blaring, the thunder of Ukrainian artillery firing back, and the sharp crack of explosions ripping through the fog-drenched fields. The war had erupted in full, unforgiving force. Yet when the counterstrike came, it arrived quickly, almost seamlessly, guided by Western satellite intelligence and rehearsed drills, as if the Ukrainians had practiced the response 100 times over in preparation for exactly this moment. No sooner had the Ukrainian air defenses blunted the first Russian wave than a second layer of their carefully prepared strategy unfolded. From concealed launch points miles behind the line, Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 drones glided into the pre-dawn sky, their long wings catching the faint light as they rose higher. Accompanying them were swarms of smaller kamikaze UAVs, including US-supplied Switchblades and Phoenix Ghosts, fast, expendable, and designed for one precise purpose: to carve through the Russian supply chain with relentless accuracy and leave advancing troops vulnerable to the next phase of Ukraine's counterattack. Within minutes, the drones locked onto their targets: a Russian supply convoy, ammo trucks, fuel carriers, and armored resupply vehicles, was crawling down a narrow two-lane road barely 10 miles east of the front. The lead Bayraktar, guided by NATO-provided targeting data, released a Turkish-made MAML precision munition directly onto the first fuel truck. The blast tore the vehicle apart, igniting its cargo and sending a towering fireball nearly 200 feet into the night sky. Flames cascaded onto nearby vehicles, and the convoy ground to a halt in chaos, trapped and exposed under the relentless drone assault. Flames rolled across the asphalt as fuel ignited, creating a searing barrier of fire that trapped the convoy in place. Panic rippled through the Russian column. Drivers tried to reverse, others abandoned their vehicles, but it was already too late. From above, the kamikaze drones plunged in, one after another, slamming into ammunition carriers with surgical accuracy. Each impact triggered violent eruptions, first a sharp crack, then a rolling boom that shook the ground. Within seconds, the blasts merged into a thunderous chain reaction as rockets, artillery shells, and mortar rounds inside the trucks cooked off in rapid succession. The road became a corridor of fire and shrapnel, with shock waves rippling across the fields and black smoke rising in towering plumes visible for miles. The entire stretch of road became a blazing inferno, glowing orange against the early morning haze and visible for miles. Russian crews abandoned their vehicles in panic, some fleeing blindly into nearby fields, others desperately scrambling for shallow cover as a relentless shrapnel and burning debris rained down. The effect was immediate, devastating, and far-reaching. With precision strikes from Western-supplied drones severing their lifeline, Russian forces were left disorganized and compelled to alter their tempo under intense Ukrainian pressure. Armor and mechanized infantry that had been advancing steadily now faltered, hesitation spreading through their ranks as smoke thickened. Pulled into a kill zone of their own making, cut off from resupply and stalled by the burning wreckage, they found themselves exposed and vulnerable. Funneled directly into the precise range of Ukraine's waiting artillery batteries, many armed with US-supplied M777 howitzers and guided rounds. The Russian columns came under punishing fire. The trap was closing fast, and for the first time in hours, the battlefield momentum shifted decisively toward Ukraine. The Ukrainian drones, silent sentinels circling high above the battlefield, had shifted the tide not through sheer destructive power, but by striking with precision exactly where the Russian columns were most vulnerable. What began as a desperate defense was quickly transforming into a carefully orchestrated opportunity for counterattack. Equipped with NATO-supplied surveillance feeds and strike-capable Bayraktar TB2s, the drone operators coordinated with artillery batteries below. Even the Russian aircraft near Kiev airfield, once attempting to harass Ukrainian positions, now found themselves hunted relentlessly by eyes in the sky and precision weapons guided by Western technology. Thus, thunder of heavy artillery split the night in relentless succession. Batteries of NATO-supplied 155mm howitzers unleashed a punishing storm of precision shells, their barrels glowing red-hot as round after round arced high into the darkness. Then came the second hammer. From mobile launchers carefully concealed under camouflage netting, Ukraine's US-supplied HIMARS fired a ripple of ground-to-ground rockets with devastating precision. The sudden barrage tore into Russian formations, proving once again that American technology in skilled Ukrainian hands could dictate the tempo of battle. Each streaked upward, leaving sharp white trails cutting boldly across the dark horizon. Their chosen target was a Russian forward command post that had been directing the entire assault with increasing desperation. The American-supplied HIMARS rockets found their mark with brutal precision. A split second later, the position erupted in a towering fireball that lit the countryside for miles. Radios went silent, vehicles flipped violently, and the entire command node, once thought secure, was reduced to smoldering wreckage under Ukraine's relentless strike. Ukrainian artillery pounded the front line without pause, while American-supplied HIMARS systems decapitated the Russian leadership with pinpoint rocket strikes. Above, reconnaissance drones circled steadily. Russian units staggered under the overwhelming weight of the coordinated barrage, their movements breaking down into chaos. Some crews abandoned their vehicles entirely, sprinting for cover in nearby tree lines, only to be hunted seconds later by precision strikes that left no sanctuary. From above, the entire scene resembled not a coordinated advance, but rather a battlefield, dissolving rapidly into chaos and collapse. For Ukraine, this was more than mere retaliation. It was calculated orchestration, the deliberate layering of surveillance drones, long-range artillery, and precision-guided HIMARS rockets that systematically turned the Russian offensive into a one-sided slaughter. The earlier destruction of the armored convoy had set the stage, crippling momentum and exposing weaknesses. But it was the synchronized strike of American-supplied guns and mobile HIMARS batteries, coordinated in real time through secure NATO-grade networks, that sealed the outcome beyond doubt. In a matter of minutes, what had been a strong Russian push had collapsed into smoke, silence, and the distant echo of Ukrainian and Allied artillery rolling steadily through the mist. Yet even as Russian jets lifted off, Western-supplied air defense systems and Ukrainian radar networks were already repositioning, preparing to blunt the strike before it could alter the balance. Soon, more than a dozen MiG-31 Foxhounds roared into the sky through the darkness. Their mission was clear: reclaim control of the air, suppress Ukraine's artillery observers, and give battered Russian ground forces room to breathe. But Ukraine was ready. From concealed forward bases west of Kryvyi Rih, MiG-29 Fulcrums and Su-27 flankers climbed hard, engines howling as they raced to intercept. They weren't alone. Western AWACS aircraft fed live radar tracks, and NATO-supplied SAM batteries quietly shifted to cover the air corridor, ensuring the Russian thrust would meet layered resistance rather than open skies. Alas, clash came hard and sudden, ripping open the night with violence. Missiles slashed through the darkness, their exhaust trails painting the sky in streaks of burning white fire. A Russian Su-35 rolled desperately to evade, its pilot jinking hard, only to be caught cleanly by a deadly R-73 missile fired from a Ukrainian MiG-29, guided by NATO-supplied targeting data. The advanced fighter erupted into flames, spinning downward in a fiery spiral before slamming into the fields below. Seconds later, a Russian MiG-31 unleashed a long-range R-37 missile, forcing a Ukrainian Su-27 into a violent dive that nearly tore its wings apart. But the maneuver worked, and the flanker pulled out low over the tree line, still in the fight. Above it all, Ukrainian UAVs, many guided by American satellite links, circled patiently, their advanced sensors feeding precise targeting data straight into the pilots' cockpits. When Russian fighters tried to disengage, the drones painted their positions with pinpoint radar designations, allowing fulcrums and flankers to fire almost blind into the fog and still strike true. The roar of afterburners mingled with the crackle of explosions, yet it was the fulcrums and flankers, guided by NATO-fed intelligence, that steadily gained the upper hand, pushing Russian pilots further onto the defensive with each passing minute. Allah's combination of manned fighters and unmanned eyes in the sky had decisively blunted Moscow's attempt at air dominance, keeping the battlefield firmly in Ukrainian hands, while NATO satellites streamed constant updates into the fight. The collapse of Russia's air push left its ground forces not just exposed, but scattered, confused, and dangerously vulnerable to precision strikes. Ukrainian commanders wasted no time, seizing the moment with confidence and ordering a full mechanized counterattack designed to drive deep and fast into enemy lines, leaving the Kremlin's war planners scrambling for answers. From staging areas concealed behind ridgelines, disciplined columns of infantry, fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers surged forward, their engines growling as treads chewed through the damp soil with relentless momentum. Overhead, kamikaze drones supplied by Western partners dove low in coordinated waves, forming a deadly curtain of precision fire that shielded the advancing Ukrainian units from counterattack. At just a few hundred feet, Ukrainian infantry teams raised their shoulder-fired ATGMs and locked onto the stalled Russian armor clogging the roadside. With steady hands and cold precision, they loosed their shots. The missiles streaked across the short distance in blinding arcs and slammed into steel with devastating force. One tank's turret was blown sky-high in a thunderous fireball, while another vehicle erupted into flames, the blaze leaping hungrily to others parked too close. In seconds, the armored line was reduced to a row of burning wrecks, and the Russians inside had nowhere left to hide. The battlefield that had once promised a breakthrough now stood as a graveyard of stalled ambitions, yet larger questions loomed. Could any Russian base truly be safe from the seamless coordination of drones, artillery, and strike aircraft now on display? How would Moscow respond to such a crushing setback, through escalation or retreat masked as resolve?